Long wait times to get your plane into an A&P? Well, it might just get worse. Let's talk about it in the hangar. Welcome to In the Hangar. I'm Christy Wong. Today's episode is brought to you by Gold Seal, iFly GPS, and Wingfield Aviation. Welcome our panel of A&Ps. So the first thing I'm going to do is ask you to just introduce yourself briefly and tell us what kind of maintenance you perform.
I'm Paul New, Jackson, Tennessee. We perform general maintenance and structural repairs on Cessna 210s, the Columbia series, and the Cirrus.
Awesome.
And been there since 1974.
Wow. Okay, very good. Chelsea.
Chelsea Smith, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and I do a lot of general aviation maintenance. I'm involved with some stuff on the warbird side. I haven't ventured into the turbine sector yet, just a little bit of training for type ratings on that. But besides that, I'm all general aviation at the moment.
Excellent.
I'm JD Kuti. Build engines mainly is my main thing. I'm an engine builder, own an engine shop. I did just recently venture in and purchase a maintenance facility with my partners. I took it over a week ago. So learning the finding A&Ps is, hard, which I think is what we're fixing to talk about.
Yeah, let's just roll right into that. What is the current state of the A&P world? I mean, there's a ton of A&Ps out there, right? What does A&P even stand for? Let's talk about that.
A&P stands for Airframe and Power Plant. And so there's two ways to get those certificates. The first is to go through a Part 147 program, which is just like a Part 141 for the flying, or you can do a 30-month apprenticeship and then get signed off, and you still take the same test. And then you could choose to either get your airframe or your power plant, but most everybody goes through and does both.
So it's like the difference between like a 141 flight school versus flight training through Part 61.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could look at it like
Great. Well, there's got to be a ton of A&P mechanics out there, right?
If only.
If only. Okay.
If only.
What does that mean?
Well, not many people want to work on small airplanes.
I can't imagine why. Airplanes are awesome.
They are awesome, but it's the work in the turbine world, the airlines and those sort of places, corporate, is easier work and often better pay, apparently better conditions. It's a different type of person.
Okay. What do you guys think? Not so many A&Ps out there?
No, they're definitely hard to find. I've been looking for past couple weeks for A&Ps, a director of maintenance, and really just having a tough time.
Gotcha. So what made you guys want to become A&Ps then?
Oh, I grew up with it. Well, I started when I was about 6, and Dad would buy a wrecked airplane, we'd rebuild it, and I got to do the bucking the rivets in the tail cone because I was small enough to get in there. So I've been doing this my whole life.
You were born to do it.
I was born with it. I went through the avionics. That's my formal degrees in aircraft electronics.
Okay.
So it's what I enjoy doing, and you don't do GA unless you enjoy doing it.
So you went through the school route to get your...
No, I went through the apprenticeship, the 30-month, did it by experience, but I started in the avionics in my formal training. So I have a degree in aircraft electronics, but then went back into the maintenance side eventually.
Chelsea, what about you?
I started out flying and knew that I wanted to fly. And when I started looking at programs, I saw aviation maintenance and knew that that would somehow get me closer to flying. So I did my A&P before I went back and finished my private. And so now I do both.
So you went through the school route?
Yes, I went through the Part 147 program. And that was, for me, it was 2.5 years. I think the quickest accelerated program you can do is about 18 months.
Okay. But it's full time, like
it's
go,
full
go.
time. It was close to 30 hours a week for 2.5 years, and I feel like that's something that contributes so much to the aviation maintenance A&P shortage, is the amount of time it takes to get that certification and that license. At the end of it, I had almost 2,000 hours.
Wow.
So when you factor that into if it was flying or something like that, you'd already be well past ATP if you were going that route on the flying side. So I think the dedication is huge. And when people start trying to figure out when am I going to find the time to sit through that program or go through 30 months to get their ratings that way. It's a lot to take on.
True. JD, what made you want to be an AMP?
Well, I've always been an engine guy my whole life, and I actually kind of stumbled into it. I had a gentleman come to me and said, "Hey, there's an engine shop hiring. You should really go talk to him." And I did, and I've been doing it ever since. They hired me on. I kind of started at the bottom, learned all the different machinery, and worked my way through. That's how I got my license, was on the job training, and just kind of kept following with it. I went to work for Continental for a while, and then now I do my own thing.
Gotcha. Excellent. Well, Chelsea kind of talked about it a little bit. I'd like to circle back. What do you guys think is contributing toward the shortage of aviation maintenance AMPs?
Well, the schooling is expensive, so that's kind of a step back for some people. They start looking at the amount of time it takes, the price of it, and then as a mechanic, I don't think a lot of people coming into the industry really look at it as a liability aspect, but everything you sign off is you're liable for that, and I think a lot of the younger guys even come into the industry and end up right back out of the industry. I've seen it both ways where, a gentleman can come in and do really well and just not want the liability side of doing everything, so they kind of leave. And then you also see guys that start going to schools that don't go all the way through it just because of the amount of time it takes to do it.
Yeah.
So what we found, so many young people don't even realize it's an industry that exists. So they don't pursue it to begin with. They don't learn about it from their guidance counselors in high school. It's just not even on their radar. And when I speak to groups of students, no one's ever even thought about going to the airport. It's just not something that's there. The other issue is, as JD kind of alluded to, there are other industries that are easier to do, and the skill set that an AMP has is pretty unique. And it's right up there with someone that works on antique cars. You have to actually be a mechanic. It doesn't lend itself very well to parts changers in the GA world because we do the whole spectrum. We do the troubleshooting, the repairing, and the whole bit. And that's kind of a tall order.
Yeah, you're effectively airplane doctors.
Right, and we deal with everything. And there are a lot of things that we do on small airplanes, especially legacy airplanes, that there aren't instructions on how to do this. So you have to figure some of these things out. And it's not like a car. You don't get to plug it into a computer to figure out what's wrong. You have to go figure it out yourself, which means you have to understand it.
True. How have these issues affected your shop?
Well, at the moment, I have 5 mechanics in my shop, in addition to myself. And we are looking for at least 3 more. And we have been for probably the last 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
And we train from within as well. So we will hire local people that are actual mechanics. I don't care if they're a lawnmower mechanic. If they're an actual mechanic, it's real easy to turn them into an AMP. Takes some time, and we foot the bill for a lot of that. But at least you get someone that's from the neighborhood, has roots, and aren't going to pull up and leave you right away as soon as they get all the training. But sometimes we have to reach out. I have a new AMP IA, very experienced, that's moving here that we've imported from the Czech Republic. And he will be here in about 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
And that's the extent that we've had to go to get some people.
Well, that's good news at least. You mentioned IA. What is an IA and what does it take to become an IA?
From an IA. I'm not an IA.
Well, an IA is an authorized inspector. The FAA decides you have the experience, you have the know-how, so that you can now inspect other people's work. And it's a whole nother testing process, another education. It's if an AMP is a bachelor's degree, the IA is a master's degree.
Gotcha. Okay.
You have to
And you-
hold a
yeah.
AMP for 3 years.
Okay.
prior to-
Experience requirements,
right,
yes.
in order to become an IA. And then there's requirements once you have it of how many annuals you have to do a year to keep it.
It's like your currency
Or
for
some
flying.
classes.
Okay. Is an IA kind of like a CFI, or who trains other AMPs?
AMPs.
Wow.
That's why it's, a lot of it's called on-the-job training. We go through and you take the time with the person, you invest time into them, and you show them how it's done, and, kind of start letting them go on their own a little bit, and make sure you come behind them and watch them. And, it gets to a point where they can do it, routinely and do it properly, and you don't have to worry about it.
What do you guys see are some of the solutions to the AMP shortage?
That's a great question. And as soon as you
short
find
of
the
going to
answer,
Czech Republic,
as soon as you find the answer, all three of us really want to know.
I think a lot of it, like he said, is education to, the education world today doesn't teach kids about airplanes and the jobs that are available in aviation. I tell my kids, I've got 2 younger boys that hopefully one day fill my shoes. And none of their friends know anything about an airplane. Never, they walk into my shop and their minds are just blown away by what we do. But never once has anybody said anything to them in the schools about, hey, you ever thought about being an airplane mechanic? There's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of different jobs within being an AMP. Whether it's avionics or jet engines or piston engines or GA or full restorations. I think he does a lot of full restorations. And everybody has their own feel for that stuff.
Chelsea, do you have any input?
Just the same thing to piggyback on that. I mean, going into the school systems and telling kids not only about the AMP program, but resources that you can offer them to, okay, so you've inspired them, but now where do they sign up if they do want to pursue it? Or if they can go on and do an apprenticeship, what local airports are close to them that they can go and start getting bending wrenches and cutting their teeth on that, and just the introduction and letting people know that those programs are out there and then showing them how to achieve it.
That's a great idea, actually. So viewers, if you guys have access to your local school systems, please get them involved in your local airports. I'm worried because I have a 1981 Piper Warrior, the best Warrior there ever was. And I'm concerned because I know that my airplane is aging just like the aging GA fleet. What does the future look like for those airplanes and the access to AMPs to maintain them?
That's a tough one because we don't know where the AMP market's going. It's as long as there's younger people coming in, of course, there's always going to be people able to work in the industry. I think she's younger than me, but I'm fairly young in the industry. So you have to really just kind of teach the kids the love that you have in order to be able to fill those shoes. It just is a hard one to fill and be able to tell where it's going to be in 10 years from now. Who knows?
It's an interesting concept as well. In the general aviation world, you take your Warrior in for whatever work you're going to have done, and it's not uncommon for you to leave with your airplane and not having had paid your invoice yet because everybody just trusts and all that. So I think it's going to become way more businesslike, which I actually hope it does, and it's going to be way more expensive. We charge $100 an hour, which is probably not enough for the kind of work that we do. But in order to compete with FedEx, who is 70 miles from us, and they pay very well, they have wonderful benefits, and to be honest, the work is not very difficult, mostly changing parts. So to get someone to not go to FedEx requires that we start really upping our pay scale, which means you get to pay more. And what year model is your?
1981.
1981, so it's an antique.
Oh, thanks.
I hate that. But when I speak to 210 owners, and I do classes on the 210 for ownership, and it's the first thing I tell them. They quit building your airplane in '86. They're all antiques, and you have to get a feel that you're going to have to find someone that is willing to work on an antique, and you're going to own something that's an antique. I'm sorry.
I know, I'm like my heart right now. Well, what can we do as owner operators for our airplanes?
I think start tackling some of the preventative maintenance stuff yourself and learning how to do your oil changes, your tire changes, and getting more of a grip on understanding the full picture of your maintenance at home and building good relationships with your mechanics that will assist you in being successful in those things in your own hangar.
Okay. What do you think?
She nailed it.
Okay.
And don't expect your mechanic to be responsible to make your flying affordable. That's not their job. Their job is to make it safe and successful. And so when owners, I don't have very many of these anymore, you raise your rates high enough and all the owners that you don't want around go away. It's an interesting concept, but it works. If you want that mechanic to be there 5 years from now or 10 years from now, you need to expect to pay for what they're doing. And I'm not talking about, nobody's getting rich. I can assure you, JD's not getting rich. I'm not getting rich. We're paying the bills and we're doing something that we enjoy doing. So we're not out to get everybody's money. We're just trying to survive. And so we just want you to pay what's fair. And I don't mean you specifically, but in general, yeah.
Yeah. What final words of wisdom do you have for our viewers?
Take the time to learn your aircraft. Like she was saying, your oil changes, preventative maintenance. It's well worth taking the extra time, learning your airplane, learning your engine specifications, learn how to do compressions, learn how to do a bore scope. Do a lot of that. Learn how to do some of that yourself. Of course, don't do everything yourself. We put all the mechanics out of work. We've got we've got to be able to pay the bills at the end of the day. But
The FAA does limit it somewhat. So it's
I
okay.
mean, there is a limit, but it helps you understand when the mechanic comes to you and says, "Hey, this is what's wrong with it." You start to kind of understand the concept of what's going on, what he's talking about, not just getting hit blind with, "Well, I don't even know what that does." Learn it. Kind of take a little bit more in on the maintenance side of, if the mechanic comes to you and says something wrong, ask them to explain it to you if you don't understand. I know for myself and most mechanics, we don't mind showing you what we're talking about or how it works, and so you can really get a grasp of what we're talking about. And I think it would benefit the owners, because then they sometimes don't feel like they're getting ripped off if they think they're paying too much for something. But when you can justify it and show it to them, they're a lot happier at the end of the day.
We're happy to show you how difficult it is to get the blue widget out of the left wing. So you don't wonder, why did it take 2 hours to do that? So, yeah, that's true. Most mechanics are very happy to spend some time explaining things. I would also suggest that owners join a type club. Whatever type club there is for your airplane, get in there, get on the forums. You will learn a lot about your airplane. There's some bad information there, but you can usually weed through and find the good stuff.
That's a really good information. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And as an owner-operator, it scares me, but it also helps me. So I really appreciate the info. Thank you, everyone, so much for watching. What do you think about the current state of AMPs? Have you ever thought about becoming one? And what do you think about owner-operators taking charge of their own maintenance? Leave your comments below. We'd like to hear from you. Like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you next time in the hangar.